Muslim to practice what is known by all people to be good, such as obeying traffic laws, penalizing the criminal, stating the truth, etc., and also rejects what is known as bad or immoral, such as intoxication, harming neighbors, stealing, and lying.
Some scholars say ma'ruf is that which is recognized by all people as good, and munkar is that which is recognized by all people as bad.
Islam by now has a strong footing in Arabia, and the Muslims enjoyed the peaceful years after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah was signed. However, this peace would not last. 2 years after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah was enacted, one of the Quraysh tribes breached it, attacking and killing 20 people from a tribe from the Muslims' camp.
The treaty is basically, at a certain point, seen as violated by the Meccans, who undertake a series of attacks or getting others to attack the Medinan community. And so, in effect, the Prophet says this is abrogated. The Medinan community moves on Mecca. And at the end of the day, the Meccans, realizing that they are facing a highly motivated community, and in a sense, overwhelming odds, are subdued, surrender.
The Prophet moved into Mecca with as many as 10,000 people and entered the city peacefully. He entered the city with his head bowed down in humility to God and with respect for the city's sacred house of God. He forgave the Meccans with his famous words, "Go about wherever you may please, for you are set free." Muhammad's action in forgiving the Meccans was magnanimous, since Muhammad was at the peak of his power and he could have easily crushed the Meccans. In contrast, the Meccans, at the peak of their power, executed the Muslims, who were weak and defenseless.
The genius of the Prophet here as a leader is very interesting, because he does not choose to do what many at that time might have chosen to do, and that is to simply subdue and slaughter, in a way to get revenge, to retaliate and get back. But rather he takes the high ground. The Prophet accepts the surrender. A fairly significant number of notables convert to Islam, and the Prophet indeed offers positions of significance to a number of the Meccans. And so in many ways, the Meccans now become absorbed within that broader Islamic community.
During the Muslims' peaceful re-entry into Mecca, the Prophet announced, "Anyone who enters the house of Abu Sufyan, who is the leader of the Meccans, is safe." Here, we see that the Prophet was acknowledging the stature of the leaders of Mecca, and he showed that the Muslims were not to abuse the social and political structure of the society. Once the city was opened, Muhammad appointed Attab ibn Asid, a member of the Quraysh tribe, to rule the city, rather than placing himself or his regime to rule over Mecca. God emphasizes in the Quran the sacredness of the human soul and condemns acts of terror. If anyone slays a human soul, unless it be in punishment for murder or for spreading corruption on earth, it shall be as though he had slain all mankind. Whereas, if anyone saves a life, it shall be as though he had saved the lives of all mankind. Quran 5:32. Muslims believe that any regulation or act made for saving a human life, such as traffic regulations, medicinal child-proof bottling, and the protection of the ecological system, are examples for saving the human life. A Muslim is rewarded for inventing and practicing such measures and showing respect for the human soul. The Islamic law, Sharia, is a community moral law derived from the Quran and the teachings of Prophet Muhammad.
The Sharia is not just a legal system. It's an orientation towards God. Literally, Sharia means the path to the watering hole, which means that by taking certain actions, we can come closer to the source of divine goodness and justice. So that includes not only creating laws in society like criminal laws and contract laws, but also forming our family life, our community life, looking at our relationship with our neighbors. One interesting thing about Islamic law is that Muslims have moral and legal obligations to their neighbors. It's impermissible for a Muslim to go to sleep while his or her neighbor is hungry. Your neighbor in Islamic law has a right to come and demand, in fact, food from you if they're in need. So that idea that the legal system is a way to create a sense of community, a sense of responsibility beyond the individual, although of course individual rights are also protected.
The Sharia is built around the protection of 5 vital elements.
There are 5 important things in Islam that must be very strictly protected. The blood of the people, the life of the people, their property, their religion, their honor, which is related to family, related to themselves, no defamation, no gossip, no spread of rumors against somebody, all of these things. And then people's mind, their understanding, their knowledge, all of these things, they have to be protected.
Muslims believe that the severity of punishment for certain crimes in the Islamic law is for deterrent purposes.
The Quran says that in the punishments of retribution, that there is life for people, meaning that some crimes, if they become widespread in a society, can cause great damage. Not only can individuals be harmed, but people will feel insecure. They won't be able to live a normal life in society.
It has been proven that people are less likely to commit unlawful violations so long as the penalty is stiff. For example, in California, a traffic citation point in 2004 requires 18 months to be removed off a violator's record, versus 6 months requirement in the mid-1970s. Similarly, the level of intoxicant found in a drunk driving citation was lowered to 0.08 in the early part of 2000 from 0.12 in the mid-1970s. To Muslims, avoiding punishment is part of the judicial system. The Prophet teaches jurists
to avoid the punishment by any suspicions.
The Islamic law also offers an alternative for capital punishment by means of pardon or monetary compensation.
If someone commits a deliberate act of murder in an Islamic legal system, the family of the victim has the right to forgive that person. They also have the right to demand punishment, or they can ask for compensation. And the Quran states that it's preferable for the people to forgive. Why is that? Because forgiveness itself is an act it frees the people who have been harmed from a sense of anger, a sense of victimization. It empowers them to have some control over the situation by giving that act of forgiveness.
The Quran emphasizes peaceful dialogue. Invite all to the way of your Lord with wisdom and beautiful preaching, and discuss with them in ways that are the best and most gracious. Quran 16:125. Say, O people of the book, come to common terms as between you and us, that we worship none but God, that we associate no partners with him, that we erect not from among ourselves lords and patrons other than God. If then they turn back, say, bear witness that we are at least Muslims, bowing to God's will. Quran 364.
A delegation from Najran, which is a city in the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula, came all the way to meet with the Prophet and to explore his idea and his belief about Jesus Christ and Christianity. They would come and enter the city of Medina, and there the Prophet would receive them in his own mosque, the place of worship, and he will give them permission to offer their prayers in their own way, and then he will sit with them and speak to them and dialogue with them, and this lasts for 3 days.
At the end of the visit, the Christian delegation declined the Prophet's invitation to accept Islam. The Prophet accepted their decision and gave them a letter assuring their freedom of worship and safety. Here is a part of his letter. Najran is under the protection of God and his Prophet. Najran's homes, churches, monks, priests, and their present and absent and alliance shall be safe.
We have numerous examples of not only the Prophet, but his successors, the caliphs who came after him, they would talk and dialogue and sit in long sessions of discussion with the non-Muslims, with Jews and Christians.
Muslims believe in the fraternity of all people. God said, "O humankind, we created you from a single pair of a male and female, and made you into nations and tribes, that you may know and deal with each other in kindness, not that you may despise each other. Verily, the most honored of you in the sight of God is the most righteous of you, and God is knower, aware." Quran 49:13.
Some people still want to believe that Islam is a threat to the West, and that Islam is a religion that promotes violence or teaches violence. This is far from the truth. Islam, the very word, comes from peace, the word meaning peace, and Islam is a religion of peace. Muhammad the Prophet embraced Christians, he embraced Jews. Jews and Christians lived among Muslims and under Muslim authority, and had the freedom to practice their religion and conduct their affairs as they did before Islam.
If there is communication and understanding, then there is friendship, collaboration, and bridge building.
If dialogue between Christians and Jews was the mandatory work after the Holocaust, dialogue between Jews and Christians and Muslims is the mandatory work in our own day and time. My own Christian tradition says, treat your enemy with respect and love, and turn your enemy into your friend. There's a table where we can sit down and talk long before we have to get to acts of desperation.
We are all our brother's keepers. We all must love our neighbors. And we have an ethical obligation not to destroy one another.
For 70 years, Muslims and Christians performed their rituals and prayers side by side before the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, Syria, was expanded in 705. Caliph Al-Walid ibn Abdul Malik bought the St. Baptist Church, which was east of the mosque, from the Christians in exchange for 4 other churches in the city. Today, the tomb of John the Baptist stands in the center of the Umayyad Mosque, along with the original baptismal well and stone-made pot. One of its minarets is known as the Minaret of Jesus. Muslims believe that Prophet Jesus will be returning to earth and will start his mission from this holy place. Muslims are then supposed to follow him as well as Christians. In an effort to bridge between Muslims and Christians, Sheikh Ahmad Kuftaro had called on both Muslims and Christians to work together, paving the road for his return. History shows that when Muslims and Christians clashed, they discovered that they share much of the same values. The Crusaders and Saladin is an example. In the book Saladin in His Time, P.H. Nupi stated, "The Crusaders were fascinated by a Muslim leader who possessed virtues they assumed were Christian." Saladin's image was in the Millennium issue of Time magazine. Time magazine wrote about Dante's Divine Comedy and said, "But perhaps what should be most surprising in his catalog of great-hearted souls was a figure solitary, set apart. That figure was Saladin." When Dante, the most Christ-centered verse ever penned, wrote lionizing his name, Saladin had been dead for over 100 years. Dante's writings stand today, as it did in the past, as a testament to Saladin's extraordinary stature. When Saladin captured Jerusalem from the Franks, he spared the lives of 100,000 Christians. Richard the Lionheart negotiated peace with Saladin. Saladin could have exploited the situation since he had the upper hand. However, he followed Islam's quest for peace and spared their lives. God said, "It may be that God will grant love and friendship between you and those whom you hold as enemies. For God has power over all things, and God is oft forgiving, most merciful." Quran 60:7. In contrast, when the Crusaders entered the city 88 years earlier, they massacred 80,000 of the original inhabitants.